I'm honored to speak with you guys today about something I consider to be very important, our core values here at Rivers. We all know the core values, integritas and sedulitas, or integrity and perseverance for those of you who are not Latin scholars. And at Rivers, I think we do a pretty good job of keeping the core values alive in our lives every day. You'll hear teachers and coaches and advisors mentioning them as they mentor students. I think the words appear on the top of biology tests. They're even on the front of this podium, right in the nice school seal. But I don't think we often take the time to think about what the core values really mean and how they might guide us to happy, productive, and fulfilling lives. The first thing that I think it's important to note is that our core values are not simply words on a seal. The faculty a few years ago actually took the time to define what we think integrity and perseverance mean. In regards to integrity, we've decided we, quote, value responsibility, honesty, compassion, diversity, and respect, and acknowledge that our actions have a profound impact on ourselves, on others, on the environment, and on the community as a whole. In regards to perseverance, we, quote, acknowledge that the diligent pursuit of intellectual, creative, physical, and moral excellence is essential to one's strength of character. So I hope you can see that much of what we as a faculty want to instill in you guys as students comes back to those two words, to that common denominator of integrity and perseverance. And that's the point of core values, after all, to have values that we can draw on for everything else that we value. Everything that I want you guys to be as students, everything that I want to be as a teacher, comes back to just two simple concepts. Now, a few years ago, and I don't think any of you were here for this, Ms. Regan Loomis spoke in an assembly about our core values, and what she said resonated so much that I want to repeat that for you today. Not as eloquently as she did, but I'll give it my best shot. She spoke the week after the Boston Marathon, and she used the idea of running a marathon as a perfect metaphor for the ways in which our core values are interconnected. A couple of students had completed the marathon that year, and what impressed Ms. Regan Loomis most about their accomplishments was not their having finished the race, not their impressive times, not even that they came to school the next day despite being barely able to walk. Rather, for her, what was most praiseworthy was the training that came before the actual running of the race. Being prepared to run 26.2 miles on race day requires weeks and weeks of training to build up your leg strength, your endurance level, your ability to tolerate both mental and physical pain. And as Ms. Regan Loomis explained, what is most impressive about running the marathon, therefore, is the perseverance that is required to prepare oneself for the race. You need to stick to a training schedule in order to be at your best on race day. And on some days, you might not really feel like running those 10 or 20 miles that you need to log in order to train properly. It might be cold outside. You might have a lot of work to do. You might be stressed out. You might have better ideas for how to spend a Sunday morning. But to be able to run that marathon well, you have to go out and train, regardless of the circumstances. You need to persevere. And doing so over and over again in the weeks before the race, that's what's really impressive about completing a marathon. Ms. Regan Loomis's talk, however, was not just about the importance of perseverance. Rather, she went on to demonstrate, and I think quite brilliantly, that the perseverance required to train for a marathon is really all about integrity. When you set out to train for a marathon, you make a promise to yourself that you're going to accomplish something difficult. You make a promise to yourself. Every training run then becomes a part of keeping that promise to yourself. If you go out and do those 15 miles in rainy conditions on a 40-degree day, when you'd much rather be sitting at home watching trashy television, you are not just persevering. At the same time, you're actually keeping a promise to yourself that you made when you said you would run the marathon. So crossing the finish line on race day is really just the culmination of those weeks and weeks of keeping that promise. And ultimately, I think perseverance of any kind, whether it's learning how to write, preparing for a recital, perfecting your jump shot, that's all really about integrity. The two values are inextricably linked. Now, Ms. Regan Loomis's take on perseverance has inspired me to understand our other core value differently as well. So these are my ideas, not hers anymore. While we usually equate integrity with honor, there's really much more to it. The word, many of you might know, comes from a Latin root meaning wholeness. You think of integer in math, it's the exact same root. So integrity is not just about honor. Rather, at least in my mind, it's about the wholeness of one's character. For instance, I would never call someone a person of integrity if he were honorable, but acted like a complete jerk in other circumstances. A person of true integrity is well-rounded morally. She's kind, compassionate, responsible, respectful, thoughtful, and honorable. There's an impressive sense of completeness to such a person's character. But we all know that it's very, very difficult, maybe even impossible, to reach such a high standard for integrity. How many of us can claim that we are kind, respectful, responsible, and honorable all the time? I know that I can't. But integrity is still an ideal towards which we must strive, even when we know that we might fall short. But the fact that we might fail at something is never a good reason for not trying. So I'll use another athletic metaphor to illustrate my point. Any guesses? Squash. Squash, indeed. So many of you know that I play squash. And squash is a sport that it really does require a range of skills for success. Quickness, hand-eye coordination, physical endurance, strategy, mental toughness, among others. It really does. Okay? So to be a complete squash player, you need to achieve excellence in a variety of ways. But even the best players in the world will tell you that they're always working to become better in particular areas. Indeed, completeness in any endeavor is an elusive goal. And although I'm far from a complete squash player, I must admit, being the best that I can be at any given time requires that I work to maximize my strengths. Right now, backhand drives, they're pretty good. I also need to focus on improving my weaknesses. That's always the drop shot. Progress might not come easily, but I know from experience that if I work hard and I concentrate, it will come eventually. So in short, being the most complete squash player that I can be requires that I persevere. And the same idea is true, of course, for most pursuits. To be the most complete student or artist or musician, one must work diligently to maintain strengths and overcome weaknesses. And being the best that you can be requires time, effort, patience. And you must be willing to keep going, even when things get difficult or when you fail. We need to accept that we will never be the complete whatever, but that really shouldn't stop us from trying. Now, in my opinion, we shouldn't view the pursuit of integrity as anything different. As human beings, we each have different strengths and weaknesses of character. And the reality is that the world presents us with hundreds of instances each day in which our character, our integrity, is tested. Will I peek at my neighbor's answer during a test? Will I cut the lunch line? Will I pick up my trash in the library? Will I talk about a classmate behind her back? There are many, many situations each day in which our integrity could, and indeed often does, fail. But once again, the challenge is to push ourselves to do the right thing as often as we possibly can. We need to be conscious of the obstacles we face, work hard to overcome them, and be patient with ourselves and with others when we fail. In short, we need to persevere. So when we think about it that way, integrity really comes down to perseverance, just like perseverance comes down to integrity, according to Ms. Regan-Loomis. If we value becoming people of integrity, and I think we all can agree that we should, we must work at it over the long haul. We can't stop striving for completeness in our character, even though we know we're probably not going to achieve it all the time. And in fact, when it comes to our moral completeness, when it comes to our integrity, it is of the utmost importance that we persevere. At the end of the day, at least in my opinion, our character is really all that we have. It's the foundation of our relationships with other people. It concerns the way we feel about ourselves, and it affects the work that we do in our lives. So I wish all of you the best as you continue your pursuit of both integritas and sedulitas, today, this week, and for the rest of your lives. And I hope that you remember that these values are more interconnected than we might normally think. As Ms. Regan-Loomis shows us, we can persevere in even the most difficult tasks if we can keep our promises to ourselves. And as well, we can strive to be people of integrity by persevering day in and day out. I want to conclude by reminding you of something simple, but something that I think is really, really important. There are many, many things in our lives that we cannot control. But thankfully, I think our character is not among them. We can control that. So, good luck. Thanks for letting me have the opportunity to speak to you this morning.